So everybody, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. If you're listening to us on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and share. If you're listening to us on one of the podcasting sites, Amazon, Spotify, and the list goes on and on, please subscribe, like, and share that also. Today, we have one of the few progressives that actually really fights for the working class in the state of Florida and is standing up to the big corporations every day. This is Eskamani, and she is from House District 47 in Florida, represents Belle Isle, Orlando, and Winter Park. We're always grateful to have her on because she's, like I said, one of the few people that actually fights for us in Florida. So Anna, thanks so much. I really appreciate this.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Let's kick this off. And actually, I want to tease this, Anna, before you even get into the questions, because you have a special day coming up on October 25th from 6 to 7 p.m. with a very special guest. If you want to go into that quickly, I'd love for you to talk about it.
Absolutely. So we are hosting our re-election campaign kickoff, and I really wanted to be an in-person event, but of course, so many unknowns with COVID-19. It just felt like it would be more responsible and prudent for us to start planning a virtual event. So when we shifted those gears, I also was thinking, who is someone that would be really exciting to bring together at a virtual event? And I'm a big Star Wars fan. I have a Rebel Alliance insignia behind me. And so I reached out to Mark Hamill, who, as everyone knows, portrayed Luke Skywalker in the original series and has made many cameo appearances since then, and also the voice of the Joker, and just overall like an amazing guy. And so we did an event together during the Biden campaign, a virtual phone bank. And so I reached out to him, and I didn't have his contact information because it was other people that set up that event before. So I literally just sent him a direct message and got a response back, and invited him to join us, and he accepted. So we're very, very excited. October 25th. Definitely join us. If you go to honorforflorida.com/2022 kickoff, you can learn the details on RSVP. But we're very, very excited to host this event.
Right. And again, if you're looking for a progressive to donate, I definitely recommend Anna because, again, she is fighting. You could just look at her track record. Don't believe me or don't believe her. Just look at the track record of unemployment, all the stuff, and the money that she's helped people regain throughout the crisis. I know she's helped me, so I'm extremely grateful to her. So we'll go into this. First of all, Anna, can you talk about the committee meetings that you just had? What went on? Just give the viewers a little bit of a synopsis of that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are actually going back to Tallahassee for committee weeks again on October, I believe it's the 10th is the next day committee meetings start. And then we go back again the week after. So we're in the middle of these pre-meetings. Basically, it's the meetings that take place as bills start getting filed and move through the process for legislative session, which starts in January of 2022. So we're in the thick of it. We just had one committee meeting, and it was the first one. So there weren't really bills that were heard. A lot of the meetings were more workshops. However, there was the redistricting committee meetings. This is probably one of the most important areas where folks need to pay attention to right now, because every 10 years with the new US Census data, all of your maps get redrawn, whether that's the state legislative seats, the congressional seats, your county school board seats, or county commission seats, or city council seats. And for the municipalities, they have their own redistricting process. But for the state leg seats and the congressional seats, it is a legislature that draws those maps. And of course, we know how tight the Democratic control is in Congress right now. And Florida is absolutely a state that the Republican Congressional Committee is targeting because they want to take back the U.S. Congress. So we have to be really vigilant, making sure that these maps that are drawn are not gerrymandered and are drawn to be equitable and fairly represent the communities that they are encompassing, that they're drawn tightly and not all over the place to try to, like I said earlier, benefit one party over the other. So this is a very important process that just started last week, and everybody needs to be following it closely.
Now, the Fair Districts Amendment passed a while ago. Now, I know your district will be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, will be redistricted a little bit. Now, can you talk about that? Are you still, is there any kind of hanky panky in that, or go ahead?
Yeah, it's a good question, Rob. I mean, I think we can always expect some shenanigans, unfortunately, just because, you know, when legislators draw their own maps, no matter the party affiliation, it's putting power into the hands of those that are driven by their own political agenda when it comes to map drawing. So that already is like a very risky situation that you're creating. But that's what the state constitution calls for, right? This is the current process we have in Florida. I will say that when the Fair District Amendments passed back in 2010, 2011, and new maps were redrawn, major lawsuits took place because the maps that were drawn did not equitably represent communities across Florida. They were clearly gerrymandered to benefit one party over the other, and lawsuits took place. And then about 4 years later, new congressional maps and new state Senate maps were drawn. So I will say that the Republican Party has been really candid in saying that they learned from legal precedents, and so they know they have a better understanding this go around how to draw maps, and so they're kind of give off the impression that they don't plan to do anything this session, but of course you just have to be vigilant. And the fact that they're not hosting any town halls, like they're only hosting Tallahassee committee meetings, they're not bringing this outside of Tallahassee, is also a red flag, because that means the public doesn't have the best access to this process. And so we have to do everything we can to be super vigilant and make sure these maps are going to be fairly drawn based on the state constitution.
I want to talk about October 2nd in the march that you were involved in, over 1,000 people. Would you consider that a success, or what was the message you were trying to get to the governor and his cronies in Tallahassee?
Yeah. Well, October 2nd was an incredible day across the country and across Florida. There were more than 16 events hosted in Florida to call out abortion bans and to not only push back against legislation that's already been filed in an effort to mimic Texas Senate Bill 8, but also to send a message to the Supreme Court of the United States, because there's already a Mississippi abortion ban that targets abortion access at 15 weeks that will be heard by SCOTUS with oral arguments beginning December 2nd, and then I believe December 1st, and then the decision will come out in May of 2022. So there is a lot on the line when it comes to reproductive justice and abortion rights. And so in Orlando, we organized the rally here, and it had more than 1,000 people attend. Our programming was very intersectional. Majority of our speakers were Black and Brown people. We also amplified trans voices, because so much of the conversation on abortion access is just grounded as being a woman's issue, but the reality is that it actually impacts folks of every gender. If you have the ability to become pregnant, then you are impacted by these abortion bans. And if you care about someone who could become pregnant, then you also should do something about this issue. So it was really cool to see just the diversity of our audience members. And of course, to center the conversation on directly impacted people, and to not just march, but to march and this was something that we were inspired by other events across the country, to not only march for abortion justice, but to really emphasize and action. Like, what else do you do beyond marching? So that day we had an action table, 26 people got registered to vote. We also had QR codes and contact information to contact your state lawmakers, to contact Manatee County Commissioner James Thatcher, who's trying to ban abortion at a county level right now. And we also encourage folks to run for office, because we know that one of the reasons why these bans keep progressing is that we don't have people in office that are not only fighting back against it, but you also need to break abortion stigma. Like, we need to actually talk about abortion proactively, not just when it's convenient to do so. So really trying to be as abortion out loud as possible.
I want to go into this because there was, and I just learned about this today before we came on air. It's the heartbeat bill that they're bringing up, for passage. I know that was just filed in the legislature, and I know you guys are going through committee meetings. Can you talk about that and how that's going to really hurt women in Florida?
Yes. So this is basically a 6-week abortion ban, and it's reflective of what Texas has passed and what Texas is now enforcing due to the legal scheme that is in the Texas legislation, where it's not the state that enforces this abortion ban, but it's people that enforce it. And so this vigilante system avoided judicial oversight, basically. And so Florida lawmaker Representative Webster Barnaby of Volusia County, Republican, is attempting to replicate this bill. Now, I think it's important to remember that any abortion ban is a bad bill, because I actually don't think this is the one that's going to move. I do think Republicans are going to have a committee bill come out of the Judiciary Committee. It'll be very last minute, and it will likely replicate the Mississippi ban more so than the Texas ban. So we need to be on guard and ready to fight back against any type of legislation, but to not 100% focus on this one version, because I do think we're going to see others.
On Eskamani here on Fire Breathing Rob, Florida State Legislator, District 47, Orlando, Belle Isle, Winter Park. As we keep going into the interview, talking about Governor Desantis and the administration, I know school is extremely important to you. You're almost done with your PhD. You have the 2 master's degrees. You probably have more degrees than anybody in the freaking legislature up there for sure. No contest. But besides that, we're seeing the DeSantis administration not accept $2.3 billion that could go to the schools. And these schools, and I've worked in schools as far as that goes as a teacher, these schools need that money all over the state of Florida. So how can you as a state legislator, or can you even do anything to make sure that the governor accepts this funding? Because I know time is running out. And I think Florida is the only state that has not accepted this funding. I mean, it's ridiculous. Our schools are in shambles right now, and the governor won't accept this money from the federal government. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, actually, this came up in the legislative committee meetings in one of the education committees, with Republicans blaming school districts and with Democrats amplifying the responsibility of the Department of Education to make this application process easier. So it is really frustrating. And again, topics like funding public education, whether it's specific to the pandemic or just an everyday conversation, should never become partisan. And yet even something as elementary and essential as allowing our schools to navigate this pandemic with additional federal support has become another partisan fight. So it's a sad situation, because it never should have been like this. Our kids need all the resources that we can give to them to succeed and to be safe, especially kids that have different mental challenges and kids with disabilities. Like, we have to create an environment where it's conducive to their health and well-being and success, and additional dollars helps with that. So the fact that we're in this situation where Florida is missing deadlines to submit reports and to submit requests for additional funds, it's not a good place for us to be. And I'm happy to see a lot of folks calling it out.
Is there anything that we can do as,
Well, I think it definitely, definitely keep putting pressure. The Commissioner of Education, Richard Corcoran, is an appointee, but he does still work for the people of Florida, and he has his email address on his website. So you definitely should contact Richard Corcoran and express your frustration with this. You should contact your school districts and ask, what can you do to help them, and what steps are they taking to respond? And then, you mentioned these figures in Florida's political leadership, and it's just so ironic because a lot of these guys, their entire careers are government funded jobs. And yet here they are in a situation where they don't want us to get federal funding for our schools. And it's like, someone like Richard Corcoran has been on the people's payroll for a very long time. And he was trying to become president of FSU not that long ago, which is, again, another example of being on people's payroll. So it's just so frustrating to me, because there's a lot of hypocrisy here of folks that they don't let local school districts benefit from federal money, or they say that government needs to be smaller. et cetera, et cetera. And yet here they are, their entire lives are government funded jobs. And arguably they don't even do a good job, but they still get not only the salary, but they get the retirement. And so we deserve better. We just deserve better. So, don't be shy to express that and to hold these figures accountable.
Well, you just talked about Richard Corcoran. I mean, we could go to the Surgeon General making over $512,000.
Right.
I mean, he's another beauty, but
Right.
but the list goes on and on. Anna Eskamani here on Fire Breather. Anna, can we talk about 2022? I know you started the People Power for Florida, the voters registration, and we've talked about this with each other as far as past interviews. That 700,000 advantage as far as voter registration for Democrats back in 2008. Now it's only down to 25,000. What do you feel like happened? Is this because of the Florida Democratic Party? Is this on candidates not getting the job done as far as getting voters out there? What happened between 2008 and 2021?
It's a really good question. I mean, in 2011, 2012, we were actively registering voters at UCF. I mean, I was a college Democrat. We registered about 11,000 students to vote within that year. So, I mean, I know that there's still, there was always some sort of voter registration program. I mean, without a doubt, this last election cycle, we lost a lot of ground because a lot of the Democratic institutions did not do voter registration because of the pandemic. And so that without doubt, really hurt us most recently, because while we were shifting towards vote by mail requests, the Republican Party was still registering voters. And then of course, Governor DeSantis just put $2 million towards voter registration operations. So this has obviously been a goal of theirs for a while, whether we knew it or not, to try to advance voter registration numbers on the right. There's also just the demographic shifts, right? So some of this number breakdown is grounded in folks of retirement age moving into Florida from the Midwest and other parts of the country that are more conservative. And that adds to the breakdown, the partisan breakdown. And then as our people come of age, as someone goes to college and or turns 18, they don't always get registered to vote. There's not as much efficacy among a 17, 18, 19-year-old on this issue compared to those that are their senior. So we're up against these trends, which means we have to work even harder to get our people registered to vote. And that's why, I've invested money and time in those efforts. But it's also not easy work. It is very, very, very difficult work. And a lot of people would rather just put together glossy videos and try to get a viral tweet than actually be on the ground doing the work. Mm-hmm. And we're challenging that by not only being queen bees or being worker bees, but we need more. And I think also there's a lot of donors that are just shy to give in Florida right now because they don't see a path forward. But I will say that this year is so important. 2021 and 2022 are so important because if we can't A, make sure these maps are drawn equitably, and B, win elections in 2022, then we're looking at another decade of Republican control. And so we have to be very aggressive and unapologetic in our work, in our efforts. And we also have to donate to those that are doing the work, not just to those glossy candidates, but the folks that are actually on the ground building power long-term.
On Eskamani here on Fire Breathing Rob, Florida State Legislator, District 47, Orlando, Belle Isle, Winter Park. The $3.5 trillion families plan. Stephanie Murphy, obviously of Orlando, is against the bill right now. Val Demings, also, former Orlando police chief, running for U.S. Senate against Marco Rubio, is for the bill. What is your opinion on the bill? Should it have been lowered? Should it be higher? This is coming from Drew from Celebration, Florida.
Well, thanks for that question. We should absolutely pass both bills. We should pass the infrastructure deal and the reconciliation. This is not a piece of policy that is fluff. These are substantial programs and investments to make America's families stronger. And it also has investments to take on climate change and create new jobs that will allow us to combat the impact of climate change, but also build a new generation of workers that are a part of the disruption, not losing their jobs because of it. We cannot take on climate change by just always leaning on other countries to produce and manufacture goods. Like, we need to be a part of the process in manufacturing solar panels, and also in electrifying our, not even just personal cars, but our municipal fleets. Like, all of this is so freaking important to America taking care of its people and also being a global leader of a positive change. So I've already expressed my frustration with my member of Congress, who is Stephanie Murphy, because I don't think it's appropriate that we toe the line of Mitch McConnell, because that's what's so frustrating, is that even this dichotomy that this is an issue that of progressives versus moderates is like really false, because it's like 10 Democrats that are standing in the way. So a lot of moderates and progressives agree that this should pass. It's like this handful of what I would call conservative Democrats that are being influenced by their donors, not their constituents, that are holding back this package. And that's a shame, because we've seen the damage that corporate America has caused. Almost every social ill can be tied back to corporate America. And it's all about making money, and it's all about maintaining a few to have a huge mass of power. And so we have to challenge that. So I'm doing what I can to put pressure, for these Democrats to join the majority and pass Biden's, what were his campaign promises and his agenda. And so we're part of that effort to make it happen.
To the second audience question, it's on vaccine mandates. This is from Jane from Vero Beach. She writes, she believes that this is should be a freedom of choice issue. She says that, and I'm just reading this off the screen, she says that this is an issue is such as the woman's right to choose, that the government should not force you with a mandate because it is your own body, such as it's a woman's body to choose. I know that's kind of worded weirdly, but that's what I'm reading off the screen. So what is your opinion on what she says? Do you agree with that it's similar to a woman's right to choose, freedom of choice with the vaccine mandates?
I think it's a really inappropriate conflation to say that the decision to end a pregnancy is similar to the decision to be vaccinated. And there are already many vaccinations required in Florida, especially for students who go to public education. I will say that my uncle lived his life with polio, because when he grew up in Iran, he never had the opportunity to get vaccinated. And when he was able to come to the United States, my grandmother had to make special pants for him so he could use his arm to pick up his leg when he was walking. And when he wasn't walking, he was wheelchair bound. And he actually passed away about 8 years ago due to complications from polio. And so I think it's really important for people to get out of this bounded perspective on this issue and realize that there are so many people around the world that would be incredibly grateful to have the type of access that we have to life-saving medication and vaccines. And the fact that this has become politicized is a shame, because it was never supposed to be like this. Vaccines overwhelmingly are trusted by Americans, and we embrace innovation and science to solve some of the world's most difficult problems, one of which being pandemics. And so I don't think you can compare the two, especially since me ending a pregnancy is not only a private experience, but it does not impact those around me whatsoever. Me not getting a vaccine absolutely impacts those around me, because I can spread a disease.
Agreed.
So I just don't think you can compare the two.
Yeah, not my opinion. I'm just reading this off the screen.
Right.
I want to move on to the next question. Again, this is from Lucy from Myrtle Beach, and I thanks everybody for giving all these questions out. It's on the boosters. She's worried about big pharma and its hold on politicians. She got her 2 shots, she said, but she's worried about big pharma pushing more shots to make more money. She also says she's not a COVID denier or a vaccine denier.
So it's a fair question. The influence of big pharma is huge, and I don't take money from any pharmaceutical companies myself, but obviously across, especially federal government, because of the FDA approval and the weight that politicians could hold in those different spaces, my assumption is that big pharma plays a lot more in federal politics than they do state politics. But I will say that the CDC and FDA have been very critical of booster shots. And so has the World Health Organization. Like, the World Health Organization has said that they frown upon more modernized countries pursuing booster shots for everyone because there are still so many people around the world who haven't even gotten 1 shot. And then again, the fact that the United States is not recommending booster shots for every person, but only very specific categories of those that are at risk, I think speaks to the fact that if big pharma is pushing for like universal boosters, it's not working, because all of these established institutions are saying no. So I think it's a valid point to make, but the evidence of what's actually taking place does not reflect that fear right now.
Right. This is James Boris from Frisco, Texas. It says, we just saw the death of 2 women from Florida, Maya from UCF, which I'm sure you definitely know the story, and also Gabby Petito over in southwestern Florida. What laws are you willing to push as a state legislature to make sure no more women turn up dead due to male violence or sex trafficking in general?
Well, Maya was a Valencia student that lived near UCF.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's fine. I just want to make sure folks know. And then, the case of Gabby, her potential murderer is still like on the loose, right? Like, law enforcement is still looking for him. And so these are incredibly tragic stories, but they're also not uncommon. People, especially women and women of color and indigenous women, go missing all the time, and they don't get the same kind of attention. And I think there's been a really valid criticism of the attention that Gabby received over Maya. For us in Orlando, Maya was like every day, but it did not reach national prominence until her body was found. Right. And so to the viewer's question of like, what are we going to do? I mean, first of all, we have been championing domestic violence prevention and sexual assault prevention since my first days in office. And so not only in holding the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence accountable for misspending money, which was a state created entity that was supposed to be a liaison of state funding and even federal funding to domestic violence shelters. They have been dismantled and they're being restructured right now. And that was due to lawmakers like myself expressing concern of the CEO's bloated salary. But then also this past session, we were successful in passing legislation to allow survivors of sexual assault to track their rape kits in a virtual portal, with the goal of not only making sure that rape kits get processed in a fast way, but that you as a survivor actually have power to control your data, to see if there's any matches within the database, and to also decide if you want to pursue a legal prosecution or not. Part of that also means we need to further extend the statute of limitation. So that's going to be our next move. And then finally, we've also have supported policy to keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, and a renter's bill of rights that also includes really important protections for anyone that is a survivor of domestic violence, which I think needs to be extended for stalking. And right now, the residents of the apartment complex where Maya lived and worked, they've started a petition and they are pushing for the property manager to respond and create be held accountable and create a safer environment for everyone who lives there. The fact that this person could just let himself into her room is disgusting. And people should feel safe in their neighborhoods, but especially in their homes. And so we're gonna do everything we can to honor those no longer with us through action, and to make sure tragedies like this don't keep happening.
Do you feel like it's just COVID as far as the violence goes, that people are they've been sitting in the house, they lost their job, they become homeless, and it's just been an effect of that lack of government action as far as, we go back to the 3.5 trillion that hasn't been passed yet. People aren't feeling that money, the childcare, and the list goes on and on. Or is it just Trump and his vile words that kind of drummed people up to what they are now? I mean, you look at sporting events now, there's people running around chanting F Joe Biden. I mean, it's just gotten out of control in this country. There's just a lot of hate out there, violence and
Right.
poverty. So what do you feel like that's from? This is from Bobby in Providence.
Yeah, it's really a great question. So leaders absolutely play a role in creating calm versus chaos. And I do think a lot of political leaders have taken the side of chaos for whatever reason they feel is advantageous to them. And that does create more conflict and tension within our communities. And it can lead to people saying things that they never would have said before, or doing things they never would do before, like the January 6th insurrection as an example. So I do think leaders play a role in creating a culture of calm versus chaos. However, the increase of homicides alongside the ache that people experience with economic insecurity and poverty are social problems that government should be working to solve. I mean, the increase of homicides is not going to have a simple answer, but so much violence is grounded in not only the mental health issues and high stress and an attachment to substance abuse, or unfortunately just instability in different environments. And so there are interventions we can take to help with that, and that does look like anti-poverty initiatives. It does look like an intervention when things are just beginning versus incarceration, when we do trap people who we could have prevented them from going down a criminal path if we provided them with an early intervention instead. And so there really is no easy answer to this question, but I do think that addressing the economic instability of people and making mental health more readily available are ways to approach this wicked problem that would help. Which is why, going back to this reconciliation package, it's really important, because when people feel secure in their lives, they're going to be less likely to find themselves in a deviant actions or behavior, let alone violent actions and behavior. So I do think looking at harm reduction programs is something else to do. So, helping folks who are living with addiction seek help without fear of incarceration and so forth are also approaches we need to take really seriously.
Last question. I look at people like you, Carlos, also Amari Hardy, who's running for Congress right now, as people that are in the progressive movement in the state of Florida. This comes from Ashley in Delray Beach, Florida. What is next for the progressive movement in Florida?
Well, I'm one person within an ecosystem that cares about this work. And so for us and our team, we're going to continue to help people with their daily lives and make sure that we meet folks belly to belly and helping them understand that not only can we build a government that responds to need, but that we can at the same time win with progressive policies. And, yesterday I was at the East Orlando Chamber for an event. The entire event was around us as elected officials pitching an idea to chamber members, and chair members would vote for their favorite ideas, the ones that they supported the most. so I came into the space and I said, well, my initiative is going to be closing corporate tax loopholes with a policy called combined reporting. And I explained it to every table. It's kind of like speed dating. And at the end of the day, I was second place to Representative Carlos Smith, who was first place. And Carlos's policy was to basically put into place accountability measures for nursing homes to increase the pay of workers and thus the quality of care. So you had two Democrats that are a little bit on the left, compared to other Democrats at a chamber event win on the issues they were pitching. And I think it speaks to how, progressive, left-thinking approaches to solving problems are very popular when we take the time to actually talk about them and not just lean on hashtags and retweets. So I think at least for how I approach this work is that we have to lead with dialogue and conversations. We really can't cancel people who don't understand. We have to talk to people who understand and call them in before we call them out. And if I walked into that chamber space and assume that nobody there would agree with me, so I didn't show up or I talked about a different topic, then I would not have been able to leave and say, wow, the East Orlando Chamber members agree that we should close corporate tax loopholes. And that's a pretty badass thing to be able to say, but we can only say it because we didn't cancel the environment. We actually, we walked into the space and we owned it and we led by our values, and we ended up leaving with more support than we ever thought we would have for something like this.
Right. Anna Eskamani, thanks so much for your time. Where can people find more about you, and if they want to help with a voter's registration or even on your campaign for 2022?
They can just visit honorforflorida.com/volunteer, and we'll be able to get you plugged into all of our volunteer initiatives. And then our voter reg work is also peoplepowerforflorida.com. And if you go to peoplepowerforflorida.com/vote, you have our online voter registration portal as well. So definitely check it out.
All right, Anna Eskamani, thanks so much for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, sir. I'll talk to you later.